I like a loud, dirty guitar is loud. Every string sounds like a chord. The amplifier is turned way up loud, and it's real, real dirty. There's a lot of distortion in the sound, a lot of grit. Every chord sounds like a choir. My name is Swann. This is the Church of Splendor. I have all kinds of splendor to explore with you, so much that I've been chopping away all morning from the things I want to talk about. So if you get really lucky, I may finish in less than 5 minutes. Don't bet on it. But I've been playing for the past couple of weeks with my buddy Loki, who is the only god of any religion for whom I have any respect. Loki is the Norse god of mischief. He is the troublemaker god. He's a rebel. He's a rebel like Prometheus in the sense that he rebels against his fellow gods in behalf of real people. Like Prometheus, he steals the treasures, the secrets of the gods, and gives them to ordinary people. I love Prometheus. My car is named Prometheus. Not everything about Loki is admirable, and I don't wish to imply that that's so, and I don't want to lend any sort of intellectual credence to mythology. Mythology is a type of storytelling, and it's good as storytelling, and the story of Loki is good, and the story of Loki's marriage to Sigyn, his second wife, is really good. And I identified with Loki since first I heard about the man, because my father is Loki, my grandfather is Loki, my mother's second oldest brother, my Uncle Mark, is Loki. My mother has a lot of Loki, and I am Loki from every which way in my family. And everywhere you look, you find Loki in our family photos, more than once. I was Loki long before I knew his name, because I am the trickster, and I love it. I love it. It's a huge part of the delight of my life. And one of these days, I want to devote a whole Sunday just to talking about fun, because no branch of scholarship has any respect for fun, and I think that's absurd. That's insane. One of the things I cut away today, and this is something I may do another different Sunday, is illustrating how both Plato and Aristotle are in error, are wrong, with respect to their two very different approaches to maintaining the Socratic legacy in philosophy. When I published Man Alive, I attested publicly, to no response, as always, that I was erasing the entire blackboard of philosophy all the way back to Socrates. Not because good things haven't been done, good things have been done. Not because there hasn't been good work done in philosophy, but because since Plato and Aristotle, philosophy has been embarked on two madly divergent equally erroneous courses. That Plato set off in one direction and Aristotle set off in the other, and it was the wrong direction for both of them. They were both 90 degrees away from where they needed to be. Where they needed to be is where I am. And we'll get to that. That's too much for today. But Loki's appreciation for fun is one of those things that's completely missing from the world of scholarship, academia, study, careful and elaborated, documented, rigorously demonstrated arguments for what is and isn't real, how things work, how they don't work, how they can be made better. Fun is absent from that, and by being absent from it, you illustrate the defect. You illustrate that both models are defective because fun is ubiquitous among all organisms. If you can see it playing, you're seeing it playing. And you'll find it in the most amazing places. Things that you would never guess have fun do have fun. Fun is natural. Fun is normal. Fun is organic. So we'll talk about fun and Plato and Aristotle and really the other half of today's topic. We'll talk about that later too. I'll tell you what the other half is when we get to the end. But I only want to deal with one half of it today. I titled today's homily, Loki's Obstructionist Love, and that's funny to think about love being expressed by obstruction, but I will prove that this is true. I will prove that a man's love particularly is expressed by obstruction. We'll get to it. But I've been having ideas, thoughts, notions, ruminations, cogitations about Loki's particular style of humor, the mischief that makes Loki's mischief. What is mischief in this regard? But also just understanding the humor of it. So I will talk to you about three populations for humor. There is the seller, the creator of the joke. There is the buyer, the putative laugher at the joke, the intended audience, the one who was supposed to laugh at the joke. And then there is a potential third party, not necessary. The second party really isn't necessary. We'll talk about that. But there is a potential third party, and that's the target. So let's start with the seller. I told you the buyer isn't necessary. Isn't that funny? A joke really isn't a joke until somebody laughs. But if the seller laughs, it's a joke. I call this humor for one, and it's a big part of my writing. It is a big part of my writing. When you read things that are written by me, anything that I write that is intended to be read seriously by other people, in other words, it's not just a brief response to an email or a one-off comment or something like that. It's something where I truly intend for you to read it, take it seriously. Read Mark. Learn and inwardly digest. I intend to inscribe it on your brain, and I write that way all the time. I write with the intention of inscribing myself on your brain. I'm going to be in your head forever. But the nature of humor, for one, is that I'm going to make a joke that's really only funny to me. That if anybody laughs, it's going to be me, and if I don't laugh, it wasn't funny at all. But I'll give you one. This is my perfect 3-year-old joke, 4-year-old joke. You've got a child, you know a child. You're not going to teach this to your own child, but you'll teach it to your neighbor's kid or your sister's kid. So if you know a child who's 3 or 4 or 5 years old, I will teach you a humor for one joke that will work for years for that kid. Will always be funny to that kid. And it consists of remembering only 2 words. A perfect 2-word joke for a child blooming into the world of father time, a child who's been cultivated and nurtured well enough that he's ready to start making jokes, which is a uniquely human experience. That obviously speech is uniquely human, but jokes are once more beyond that, because jokes involve a conceptual understanding of the universe that is so complete that you can understand why it would be surprising and delightful to pretend to defy that factual knowledge. That is the nature of a joke, and we'll come back to that too, because it's going to require a little more theory. Whereas we can teach the essence of humor for one to any 3, 4, 5-year-old child with 2 words, and those 2 words are What's annoying? What's annoying? What's annoying? You just do that forever. This is, oh man. This is a Loki joke. And I'll tell you why, because even though it doesn't have a buyer, it has a seller, but it doesn't have a buyer, but it does have a target. And who's the target? Every grown-up in the car. Every kid in the car is going to think that's funny, and they're going to start playing too. So if you got 3 4-year-olds strapped into your back seat, those 4-year-olds are going to be telling that joke to each other, and you are going to be in misery. You only have to hear, what's annoying? Too many times before you are well and truly annoyed. And that's the beauty of it, is because it's a joke, because it's all in fun, grown-ups can't bark, stop that, you stop that right now, you cut that out. Can't do it. It's a perfect joke. It's a perfect Loki joke, because it's very funny to the seller, who is also the buyer, and it is very annoying to the target. And it's a Loki joke for that reason. Humor for 2 is obviously what you expect when you think of as humor, and I will give you another 4-year-old joke that works great. This may be the first joke that many children learn, many English-speaking children learn, because it is so easy, so simple. But the joke goes like this: knock, knock. And you say, who's there? And I say, lettuce. And you say, that is who? All right, that's an important inflection point right there, where you say, lettuce who? That's important, because the nature of a joke, the nature of every joke, I don't care how small or how large that joke is, that from the buyer's point of view, if you bought the premise, you'll buy the bit. So every joke is based on some kind of an absurd premise, some spectacularly irrational, meaning disproportionate premise. And when you say, who's there? You say, let us who? You are buying the premise of that joke. You're buying into that the premise of that joke. In other words, you're agreeing to go along with the absurd scenario. You're agreeing to suspend disbelief for long enough to find out how the joke turns out. So you say, let us who? And I say, let us be friends. And 3-year-olds love that joke because they get it. They get it. And what is the joke? The joke is the conflation of 2 homophonic sounds. That lettuce as a form of crunchy water that grows in your garden is something that the child knows and has eaten, because feeding children crunchy water is something parents do. The child knows what lettuce is, and he also understands the jussive subjunctive form of let us do this, let us be friends. It's interesting that if I just said 2 words that you really don't know the meaning of, jussive subjunctive, you should congratulate yourself, because you understand the idea anyway. The jussive subjunctive concerns potential future conditions that we both can entertain without any sort of coercion, compulsion. We postulate a future condition where we both agree to behave in a different way. Let us go hang gliding. Let us go salsa dancing. But that's a 2-party joke in the sense that the seller's giggling anyway. The seller is also the buyer, because the seller thinks that joke is very funny, and the seller will probably think that joke is funny for about 18 months. But the buyer is laughing too, and the buyer may be laughing just because it's so cute to see a kid screw up a joke, but the seller doesn't really know why the buyer is laughing. The seller really doesn't ever know what the buyer bought. That's true of every transaction. The seller is selling what the seller thinks he's selling, and the buyer is buying what he thinks he's buying, and the 2 ideas may or may not be equivalent. And unless both parties mutually agree to explore those ideas, they may never know. Buyer bought your book and never read it because he thought the color was pretty. Wanted to impress some girl that he had with him. Bought it as a gift and never gave it. You're so proud of yourself as the author of that book because yet one more person has read and digested your ideas. You don't don't know that. What you know is you sold a book, and the child doesn't know that the adult is laughing because the child is so cute. The child thinks that the adult is laughing at the joke because it's so unbelievably funny. Let us, When you're 3, it works. That's a 2-party joke. Okay, so let's go back to Loki, and I'll teach you another joke for 4-year-olds. I am full of jokes for 4-year-olds. I love 4-year-olds. I love them. They're just old enough to talk and not old enough to lie. But here's another great joke for 4-year-olds. If you're a 4-year-old watching this, you have to remember this. And so if you need to, rewind the video and practice. Practice on your friends, because diction matters, pronunciation matters, enunciation matters. This joke depends on your ability to deliver the sounds, so learn how to deliver the sounds. But you are a prisoner in a shopping cart at least once a week in a supermarket, because this is the nature of your life as a 4-year-old, is that it's probably mom who shops for groceries, but even if it's dad, when there's grocery shopping to be done, you got to go along because there's no place else for you to go. You're stuck sitting in that shopping cart. You're a prisoner. You ride, you wriggle, you try to get out, and it never works. And you're stuck there. You're just stuck there. But here's something to make it better. I can't make it great. I can't make it good, but I can make it better this way. Eventually, maybe at the start of the trip, maybe in the middle, maybe at the end, but eventually you will be all the way back in the back corner of the supermarket where the dairy cases are, and that's where they always are, to get you to walk through the whole store. Also, to put refrigeration all around the perimeter walls of the store to keep the whole place cooler. There are lots of good reasons for doing this, and the engineering of supermarkets is a wonderful study if you're older than 4. But you'll be back in that dairy case, and when you get back there, wait till you see it. You know there is a product that exists, a butter-like spread called I Can't Believe It's Not Butter. What's the name of it? I Can't Believe It's Not Butter. And you've seen it advertised on television. You've probably seen it in the fridge at your house, and you've certainly seen it at the supermarket. So wait till you get back there, until you can actually see it, till you're close enough to see it. Don't blow this joke, because timing is everything. But when you can see it, what you need to do is to sit up straight, throw your shoulders back, and as loudly as you can say, I can't believe it! Snot butter! Just like that. Those 2 words, snot butter, are funny just by themselves. And if you want to just use those 2 words as a joke with your little friends, it will go over great. They will love it. All you have to do is, you're mad and you want to express your anger, you can just, snot butter. Or, you can make fun of somebody by saying, what's that on your face? Is that snot butter? Your friends will love the idea of snot butter. It's just, and you get away with it with your mom too, because it's just vulgar enough. It's just vulgar enough to make her squirm, but not vulgar enough to make her punish you. So the word snot butter is a good Loki joke just by itself. But in the supermarket, that particular joke, I can't believe it, snot butter, that will make people laugh. Everybody in the immediate environs, everybody around the dairy case will laugh, because that is a good joke. That's a good joke. I can't believe it. Snot butter. Everyone will laugh except your mother, because you're the seller. The people who are laughing are the buyers. And your mother or your father, whoever took you to the supermarket, that person is your target. And that's a 3rd-party joke. That's a Loki joke, because it has a target. And what makes the Loki part of the joke funny is not the joke part of the joke. The joke part of the joke is funny to the buyers. But the Loki part of the joke is funny to the seller, because of the pain that you're inflicting on the target. Every Loki joke is rooted in the pain of the target. And I will tell you something interesting about this snot butter joke and many other Loki jokes, is that there will be a reflected joke in consequence of that second joke, the target joke. So you told the original joke, snot butter, and everybody laughed except your mom, who squirmed and was mortified and maybe flushed beet red because you just embarrassed her in front of a whole bunch of people. That's what you did. And then the buyers will laugh again, because they're laughing at your mother's pain. It's a double Loki joke. And my thinking is that if if you construct your jokes properly, you can probably make Loki jokes n levels deep, where each new joke results in some new target's discomfort, which results in yet another round of laughter, which results in yet another target's discomfort. This ultimately is the secret to South Park, is that kind of Loki joke. That you are laughing at what's funny, but you're also laughing at the pain that you know is being inflicted on the target of all those jokes. So the half of this week's discussion that I'm leaving off, and I'll come back to it, I don't know when, maybe next week, maybe another time, maybe never, who knows, but the part I'm leaving off is a Loki joke obviously can have malicious intent. Everything I've described so far makes them sound malicious, but of course they're not. The snot butter joke is not malicious. It is not. The discomfort that you're trying to visit upon poor old long-suffering mom is not a discomfort intended to cause her pain out of malice, but to cause her pain out of love. Love. So for now, I'm going to leave the malice off the table. It is there in many cases, certainly in the case of South Park and every form of satire and many other public demonstrations of humor is very malicious intent in the second joke, in the target's joke, the joke aimed at the target. But the interesting thing about Loki's love, Loki's obstructionist love, Loki's humor, Loki's mischief, is that the use for which it is most often deployed is not malice, but love. I live in this world. My poor wife lives in this world. She's married to Loki. And I'm always teasing her, tormenting her. I can say the most ridiculous, absurd things with profound confidence and authority and make her believe. I never abuse her trust for long. I will reveal to her that I suck her yet again, but it's fun for me. Making her squeal is fun for me. That she talks about me pulling her pigtails, and that's a metaphor, but it's not really. I mean, I pull her hair too, but I do all kinds of stuff in terms of the things that you can expect a 12 or 13-year-old boy to do to express his romantic interest in a 12-year-old girl. I do that to my wife all the time. Well into late middle age. I do not ever want to be elderly. I refuse to self-identify as elderly, but by the calendar, I'm certainly crowding that designation. See the gray in my beard? I'm no kid. Except around my wife. I've never been older than 19. Inside my mind, I became a man at 19, and I've been a 19-year-old man ever since. And I play like a 19-year-old Loki, and I play all the time with my wife, but I've been thinking about these kinds of expressions, Loki's expressions of love, and that kind of pain is frequent, is often. It's not a degrading pain, it's not a humiliating pain, it's not it's not even really experienced as pain by the target, but there is a pain element to it. And that pain is recognized. This is the nature of teasing. This is what teasing is. When I was a little boy, my grandfather had an old power supply from a crank phone in his basement. Never seen a crank phone in action. I've seen crank phones, you've seen them too, in antique stores. But when they got their Bakelite coated steel black desktop telephone, this was like a 12-pound telephone, you can't imagine anything. It was a weapon. It was literally a weapon. But when they got that phone, which was the phone they had for the next 30, 40 years, they were able to retire the old crank phone that they'd had until then. And my grandfather took it apart and did something with the bells, who knows what. But he hung onto the power supply and attached 2 leads to it. And when my sister and I were with him down in the basement helping out, working on something, every once in a while he would turn around and he would grab those 2 leads and he would say, "Hold this," and then he would turn the crank. That's 12 volts, direct voltage, direct current. The amperage has got to be nothing, so no real threat, just enough to give you a shock, to let you know you'd been shocked, but it was endlessly funny to him. It was boundlessly funny to him. And he did it to us more than once because we were children and we were so easily gulled. I mean, at some point, no doubt, we both realized, you know, there's the same thing's going to happen again. No way I'm not going to touch those things. And the joke was over then. We were old enough to have figured it out. But that was endlessly, boundlessly funny to him. And, you know, plausibly, it's a felony. I don't know. If you reported this to Child Protective Services, I'd probably lock my grandfather up. And it was nothing but love on his part. It was nothing but an expression of love. It was the kind of teasing that grown-ups do. They don't really think about, is it destructive of trust? Maybe. Is it building of trust? I'm thinking it is, because you learn that little things don't matter. Little things are kisses. Even things like that. That's a man's way of expressing his affection for his grandchildren. Funny, isn't it? It's weird. When my son was young, when he was losing his teeth, we're in this situation where we have to deal with the tooth fairy, and I don't want to deal with the tooth fairy. I mean, I hate the supernatural. I hate all this made-up stuff. I like it as mythology, and I don't hate the tooth fairy as mythology, but what are you going to do with it? After you say the tooth fairy, you're done with the whole story. There is no story. What are we going to do? We're going to build a story around the tooth fairy like those dumbass Christmas cartoons where they invent all kinds of attributes for Santa or Frosty the Snowman so they can build a half-hour story around something that isn't any story at all. It's just words. But I don't want to deal with the tooth fairy, and yet I had to do this because, you know, children expect to get paid for losing their teeth. So we invented the dot-com bomb fairy. This was right during the dot-com bomb when the first round of internet startups all imploded. Everybody suddenly woke up to the idea that you can't sell nothing, and you can't buy nothing, and no matter how much nothing you buy, you still have nothing. And a whole lot of venture capital funded and IPO funded companies went broke. Just stock value zero, plummeted. So we played the dot-com bomb fairy game, where my son would put his tooth under the pillow, and when he'd wake up, he'd find a quarter, and I would go and negotiate with him, and I'd say, you know, this is an investment. I mean, you could take the quarter and do what you want with it, or let it ride. You can reinvest it, put it back under your pillow, and tomorrow morning you may wake up and might find $1. Who knows? Might find a penny. Investment is not without risk. So we played that way, tooth after tooth after tooth, and sometimes he took the quarter, sometimes he got $1 or more than $1, and sometimes he got a penny because he just kept betting too long. But it was just a funny way of dealing with it. I mean, funny for me, funny for him, he laughed at it, and also funny for Loki because it has that element of pain in it, that risk of pain, and it was fully disclosed. He knew what he was getting into, he knew what game he was playing, and he knew who he was playing with too, which is important. I knew who my grandfather was, I knew who I was playing with. This is Loki's intentional infliction of pain as an expression of love. This is Loki's obstructionist love. And I think about this all the time when I'm thinking about my wife, because the way I tease her, the ways I have of teasing her are basically endless. I will see her walking through the house, and I can transact her path in such a way that I can block her way, and she's too kind to run into me, but she'll be forced to stop, and then I'll just grab her and I'll hug her, kiss her, and nuzzle her, and just lay her. I have nothing but an obstacle in her path. Step up behind her when she's at the sink and put my hands on her hip, put my mouth behind her ear, murmur something appropriate. The conjugal act, in case there are any 4-year-olds still watching, the conjugal act consists of pushing and crowding. If you, as a man, if you watch yourself when you are engaged in the fornicative function, separate your actions into pushing, crowding, or other. And take a look at your numbers at the end, and you'll be amazed at how little other there is. It's all pushing and crowding. That's a man's way of expressing love, is by teasing overtly in Loki jokes, by obstructing, by delaying. A man's way, Loki's way of expressing his love consists of obstruction, consists of the deliberate infliction of losses upon the person that you love. That's funny, isn't it? But the other end of this is you're delivering benefits, too, that I'm going to stop you in the hallway, but when I do, I'm going to make you very loved. And I'm going to slow you down when you're trying to load the dishwasher, but I'm going to make you very loved. And I'm going to restrain and crowd and push you every which way. When we are most frolicsomely married. But I'm going to make you feel very loved. And I just think that's fun. I think it's fun that a man's love is expressed with obstruction. And yet that obstruction is what's most rewarding to the relationship. So we'll come back to the malice, because I just don't want to cloud this day with malice. I am too much in love with being alive today. I'm in love with my life. I'm in love with my wife. I'm in love with these little times that we spend together every Sunday. You may not love it as much as I do, but you will. Maybe when you feel less like the target of Loki's jokes and more like the buyer, you'll enjoy this better. I'm so glad you could join me. We'll talk next week, and I hope I'm not too dark then, because I don't want to be dark. I want to be bright. And I believe in the comedic power of the love of Loki, the comedic power, the comedic effect that you can have just by properly, appropriately teasing and tormenting the people that you love. Bless you. Thank you so much. Have a great Sunday. I will talk to you next week.